Ampire. Babies, 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 babies. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My team plays tonight again. Hi, everyone. What's up, Callow? How's it going?
Good. Processing the weekend still.
What do you mean?
I'm catching up on sleep. I've been catching up on sleep for 2 days.
Right, because you went to Chicago.
Yeah.
To watch what, a marathon?
Yeah,
is that right?
The Chicago Marathon was on Sunday, so I did a in and out trip. Landed in Chicago at like 7:30 Chicago time, then left 10 o'clock Chicago time, and so it's been a sleep catch up the last 36 hours.
The odd coincidence was the Bears played at 8:30 Central Time because they were the London game. So was it like bars packed 8:30 a.m. in Chicago?
Yes, it was. Like every bar you walked by. So it was really surreal. It was that early on a Sunday, and the streets were packed with people, and the bars were packed with people. It was actually like, I don't know. I've really never seen anything like it, especially like in an American city. Like I'm sure overseas, there's probably some early games and stuff like that where there's big deals, but this was pretty ridiculous. So yeah, it was a good atmosphere.
I'm sending this into the universe because we're just overdue. It's been a decade since we played an international game. I think we're kind of overdue here. So Germany, Brazil, London, I don't know, Vietnam, wherever you're going next, I'm in. Let's do it next year. We could have the 9:30 a.m. Washington bars packed. I'd like to see that one. We'll get the feeds from home while I'm screaming in some booth in some foreign country somewhere.
I have a feeling that number 5 guy is probably going to give them an excuse to play in London next year or Germany or wherever.
I got a funny feeling next year we're going to have like 5 night games. That's what I think. Actually, next year, that's what I think we're going to get. We're going to get like 5 crazy night games. All right, let's go over the Ravens game from yesterday. So I started looking at the film, and you know what? Like, it's funny. I say this all the time. Like sometimes when they look really good, I watch it again and I'm like, I don't know, man. It wasn't, it ended up not being as good as I, thought. And then in this case, this is one of those, actually offensively, I feel really good about what Washington did, mainly because of Jaden. Defensively, they wore down, I think would be the best way that I could put it. I haven't gotten through the whole thing yet. I'm into the fourth quarter. They're about to score the touchdown to make it 27-20, the Jaden pass to McLaurin. So that's about to happen. That's as far as I've gotten back into it. But I'll describe it this way. Like there were a few moments that didn't go their way that were massive. One was a self-inflicted wound that was a Olamide Zaccheaus drop on a 3rd down early in the game that would have at bare minimum put him in field goal range and maybe potentially more. There are 2, the Benjamin St-Juste PI calls are both on 3rd down plays. One of them clearly should not have happened, the one where Bateman just fell down. And the other one where I thought it was a little ticky-tack, but I don't think the call was specifically wrong. There was a roughing the passer call that was missed on Kyle Hamilton that should have been called. I do agree that the one where he hit McLaurin hard was the right call, that they didn't get that one wrong. But these happened on like 3rd down plays. The first PI on St-Juste was a 3rd down play. The second PI on St-Juste was a 3rd down play. The drop by Zaccheaus was a 3rd down play. So there were more times than not at the critical pivotal moments, it didn't go their way. One self-inflicted with a drop, and the others with calls that just didn't go their way, and a couple that I didn't like. So I got to tell you, like in rewatching, the whole tone and tenor of the game is different if those 2, that specifically the ones that shouldn't have gone against them, did. And I'm not trying to make an excuse or blame officiating or anything like that, because I don't like they're bad calls in every game. But these ones happened at they weren't like 1st and 10 at the 25-yard line. They were like key critical, either drive extending or drive finishing plays, and they went Baltimore's way, and it was a big deal. So, like, the more I'm like kind of looking back, is I kind of left the stadium going, I think Baltimore's a more physical team. I think they were, I'm more ready for this moment than Washington. And in rewatching, actually, I saw Washington start to wear down, which I'm not surprised by. But like, I think that's what I thought it was. And the key moments kind of got away from them, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is what I was kind of referencing yesterday, where we didn't know what this team was heading into that Bengals game, and they needed to have a perfect game, right? I looked at that as Sunday's game, where they needed to have a perfect game to beat the Ravens, and it wasn't perfect, but it was still very, very good. As you said, in key junctures, they weren't getting a couple of these calls. They weren't making some of these conversions. They're still 9 for 9 on fourth down, by the way, which is like the most insane stat maybe of the season, just given everything.
That's latest on the list if you want it. Last time anyone did that, started a season 9 for 9 on fourth down, was 20 years ago, the Rams. So,
yes.
Like every week we get some weird new, anomaly stat about them. But yeah.
And all you're referencing there is one of the greatest offenses of all time in that one. So, yeah. And so I kind of landed on that, like I said, I watched it on delay, and I found, okay, they weren't getting these calls in these moments, and the calls were going against them, and then they weren't converting a few times. I was like, of course, things didn't go perfect, and they lost by 7. That's how I kind of landed on this game when it was all said and done.
Again, red zone execution was interesting. They had 2 procedural penalties again. So this kind of harkens back. They've had this a lot. They were able to overcome it in the last drive with the McLaurin catch in that pass. But the execution there seems to be off. And this was actually the spot where I thought Robinson was missed. Like, I still landed on, even rewatching now, that I'm not sure they would have ended up running the ball a lot more than they did if Robinson played or not. I still think in the end, they knew they had to score a lot of points. Their defense clearly wasn't. I think it would have been different if they got a couple turnovers and their defense was making some stops. And then they might think about, can we actually slow the game down and limit the possessions? But that's not what was happening. Like, the Ravens were moving the ball relatively at will. I think that was semi-predictable for them. They knew that the bet they had to make was to sell out against the run. It did not work in the first half. They backed off a little bit in the second half, and Henry started gaining chunk yardage. And I actually think the real disappointment part in the second half was watching that when they did load up the box again, Henry was still able to run on them anyway. So I think that's something I'll get to in a second. But red zone execution again is something that kind of flared up the second time. And there was a couple times, like first and goal at the 1. This is where you want B-Rob, and I think this is where he was maybe missed. That said, I thought Austin Eckler was outstanding in this game. He and McNichols both. When asked on blitz pickups, they've been fabulous this year. Eckler's timing in this offense, I think this is another one of the really unusual parts about how well they're playing here early in the season, especially offensively, is their timing is there, and yet none of these guys have played with one another. And his timing on deciding when to cut back, whether it's a straight run play or all of these kind of off-schedule creative screens that they try to run to him, he seems to be the target in a lot of them, and it's all about timing, and he seems to have it with this group. So I want to point him out specifically. He was really outstanding again the other day.
I would say Eckler and Luvu are the mirror of each other for the offensive and defensive signings. 2 guys that have just completely kind of added another layer to both their respective sides of the ball. And I'm with you. Like, Eckler is not just good, he's impressive. Like, yes. I love it when he's on the field at the same time as B-Rob too, because you just don't know what they're going to do. They could go to either one for a run or a pass, and it works out. And yes, that the one long pass to Eckler, on Sunday was incredible. It was like, this guy just seems like he's been here for 5 years, but it's been literally 6 games. I'm with you. He's been very impressive.
It's a loss. And so it's hard to contextualize this, but go rewatch if you get the opportunity and watch how Jaden played in this game. I might argue it was his best one. He moved people with his eyes consistently. The 2 touchdown throws to Terry, the first one might have been better than the second one. Like, he moved people away, floated one over a safety, like knew where he was going the whole time, had to float it over a safety into the back of the end zone. I mean, it's early in the game. It's not a clutch throw, but it's unreal. Like, it's Pro Bowl. It's MVP caliber stuff. Then he's, of course, 4th and 6 when you got to have it, throws to the only spot on the field where his guy can catch it. And, of course, Terry has to make that catch and does. There are so many times he had one really bad throw on a 3rd down that should have been picked off. but you're nitpicking if you're mad about one particular bad throw. He's just maneuvering the pocket. He's sliding a little bit. He's going to third, fourth reads. It's insane, honestly. And, it wasn't a loss, but now, like, I saw what Roquan Smith said about him after the game, where he said, like, they're in good hands. And Lamar, of course, saying all these nice things about him. Like, every week he gets better. And in this one, he can't help that the defense literally couldn't stop Baltimore. And I'll go back to, there were these few key moments that had they gone another way, then I don't know what we're talking about here. Like, the defense may have given up 500 yards and Washington won anyway, because that's how good he is right now. He's playing at an absolutely absurd level for someone of his experience level. And it was astonishing. In fact, I know it's not going to be the completion percentage he had earlier this year. It's maybe not that specific moment to Terry in Cincinnati, but overall, in a big boy game where you're playing against a team that's going to be in the playoffs this year and might be in my opinion, with that offense, especially that rush game, is a contender again to win the Super Bowl on the road. I got to tell you, man, like, I'm still kind of just literally astonished by what he's doing week to week. And it might have been his best game overall, really.
Well, you heard Dan Quinn say that yesterday, that he thought the best throws that he made of the season were all in that game. And I'm hard pressed to disagree, right?
There were about 5 of them. Like, he hit one on a third down sideline throw to Noah Brown where he got his shoulder like barely in. He had another one to McLaurin sideline throw. The 2 touchdown throws were unstoppable plays. The only way they wouldn't have scored is if McLaurin drops them. And I mean, like, just perfect dime, you can't defend it type plays. It's him sliding in. He's nuanced in the pocket already. This team was the first team. I said this last week. Teams are going to just start crowning him. They're not going to let him run outside anymore, because he's going to kill you especially if he gets out to the right. They've learned their lesson with him. This is one of the first teams that did it. They kind of kept him in there. He beat him anyway. I mean, we knew going in he was going to have to throw the ball 30 to 40 times. He's able to do it and keep them in the game. He is having the best season I've ever seen from any rookie quarterback. And it's only 6 games in, but he is. And now he did it again on a stage where the odds were stacked against them. The calls didn't go their way. They're playing in a very tough place. That's a really good team. And oh, by the way, their defense has a lot of work to do, and he still kept them in the game. His play is astonishing at this point.
The most impressive part about that 4th down throw to Terry, too, I don't know if you heard Terry in the locker room afterwards. Terry basically told him that he was going to kind of read what was going to happen. He might shake him off and then go run the fade. And he basically said, Jaden didn't read the defense. He read me. So on that touchdown, he's also having to read the defense and have to read what Terry did. And he put it in a spot only Terry could catch it. I mean, that throw becomes even more impressive than we think, because he didn't even know Terry was going to go there, is what I'm saying. Like, he couldn't even predetermine. He had to read not only the defense, but read his wide receiver's body language, essentially, and he put it in that spot. It's unreal. It's legitimately unreal.
So, all right. So let's get to what the issue is, which is the other side of the ball. And this is, I think, the challenge this week, and I think the coaches would agree with this, because this team is playing at the playing style they're looking for. They described it as, we want to see another gear. And I would say that physically, part of the 4-game win streak was they were, especially on the offensive line, but somewhat on the defensive line the last couple of weeks, they had become really physically dominant and were playing to that, when Dan Quinn says, you're going to like how we get down every week, all that stuff, like, you would see that. I didn't see it as much. They were met with the same level of physicality. I thought the Ravens kind of won just because you go look at the yardage. I would describe it more as there was a team that met them in the middle, and they weren't the dominant force this time around. So when they're in a situation like this, and I think this is why it's just so, like, this was such a great moment for them. It's early in the season. They're still 4-2. You could learn from it, and you're playing a team that has a legitimate shot to win. This is what it's like when you're going to play somebody like that. The challenge this week is really on the coaches to try to find a way to mask the flaws, because they've got them playing in the style that they want them to play. They've got them bought in. They've got them afterwards. You could see the looks on their faces like there was no moral victories in there that they lost by a touchdown on the Ravens. They know that they could have played better. There is as they put it, another gear to get to. And it can't be that lopsided and give yourself a chance to win, because frankly, like most of the time when a team gets 500 yards of offense, you lose by 30. So so there's some things to do, and this isn't their fault, and it's not Adam Peters' fault either. Like, you can't fix everything in one offseason. I think they've done an unbelievable job baselining this roster, but the flaws on that side of the ball are starting to become relatively evident, and they're going to have to do something about masking these, because maybe the Ravens are just kind of that good on offense. And when they sold out for the run, Lamar crushed them. They didn't have a corner that could cover Zay Flowers, which I thought would be a problem. And then when they did back off a little bit, then suddenly they're facing the best rush offense, and it was the gamble you had to take. And this might be a unique opponent, but there's got to be some better answers. And I think it is on the coaches to do what they can with what they have. Like, that's their job. There is no perfect roster in the NFL. Everybody's got flaws. Theirs is in the secondary. I know they're working around the clock because they're moving people around constantly. They can say we had an extra D lineman because we wanted to stop the run, and that's why Forbes wasn't active, but he was a first-round pick and wasn't active. Like, he wasn't one of the top 5 that was on the roster. You know, Michael Davis was brought in here. I don't see him playing very much. Igbenogany, I think, has done a pretty good job. They're playing Sanders still out of the position they really want him to play, but I think he's really growing and getting better. And I think St. Juice is getting a lot of heat that he doesn't totally deserve. Like, I don't think he totally deserves it. So, but it's going to be up to them to mask it. This is a little bit on the coaches. How do they schematically help these guys? Because this is what they have. It's the hand they're dealt. Every team's got flaws, and it's now on them to figure this out moving forward. And, you know, the good news is this week, they're not playing the Ravens offense, you know, like they're playing a very different opponent this week.
No, this is exactly what this defense is going to be pretty much the rest of the way, right? It's going to be, how do we bend, not break? How do we duct tape this thing together? How do we just, you know, get that one stop? I think I said to you on Friday on my show that I thought the team that was going to win this game on Sunday was the defense that gets literally 2 stops, not just one, but 2 stops. And the Ravens were the team to do that, because this defense didn't stop the Ravens. And that's just what I think it's going to be against some of these better teams. That's why I keep referencing that Bengals game. I know the Bengals aren't good, but their offense is. And so it was a literal perfect game from the defense by getting 2 stops instead of just 1. Right. That's going to be the key. That's going to be the key moving forward now. It's going to be, can you stop the bleeding for a drive so Jaden can get you ahead and then hold on, I think. I think it's pretty much what it's going to be the rest of the way.
All right, so that's them. Let me get to the game last night here for a moment. Okay. It was so funny. When they fired Robert Saleh last week, I didn't look at the schedule. And then it dawned on me that they're playing a Monday night home game for the division lead against the one team they have to beat, who they can be. And the Bills aren't exactly. The Bills just got beat by 25 a couple of weeks ago. Like, it's not like they were the first couple of games. They're very good, and Allen's great. But, like, they're not the same team. They weren't the same team coming in. They reset a lot of their roster. This is why it was so wide open for the Jets. And it was just now, in hindsight, not just because they lost, but how not thought through it was to actually fire your coach heading into that game. Home game, Monday Night Football, fire your coach against the one team you have to beat, who, oh, by the way, is only 1 game up on you in the standings, and it's week 6. It's a really dumb decision. Like, in the hindsight, and now that they lost, it looks even like a dumber decision. But I now don't even understand it, because everything I've read and seen, like, did I think Saleh was a good coach? Not really. But, like, it doesn't sound like the players hated him or it was anything like that. And that's why I think everyone, Aaron Rodgers' fingerprints are all over it, because if he didn't stand up and say, you can't fire Robert Saleh, I don't think Woody Johnson would have done it. I don't think he would have gone on a ledge and done it. They admitted they spoke to each other the night before that the decision was made. So I don't believe Rodgers here. But, like, if he did, then he proves out to be like LeBron. You're not a good GM. You should just stick to play. Stick to quarterback. Like, stop trying to make these types of decisions. Stop influencing the owner. Let the GM and the owner do their job. And while I don't think Saleh's a great coach, in hindsight, it's a ridiculous decision to do it this week. Had they lost this week and lost embarrassingly at home, I think it would have made more sense, because they'd be 2 games back at 2-4. But to do it leading into this game now seems nuts that they did it.
The only thing I can think of why they did it last week was because if they lose on Monday, you couldn't fire Saleh on a short week. Like that would be an absolutely more ridiculous decision, right? So the only thing I could think of is, did Johnson just think, okay, we have an extra day, let's just get this over with? That's the only thing I could think of. But at the end of the day, it was just so Jets that they fired him just one game out of the division, and they lose last night on a last-second field goal. It's the Jets. Like that's what it is at the end of the day. It's the Jets. I did see yesterday that there is some hope that the Hassan Reddick thing might solve itself. But like, if they lose one more game, why is he going to want to come back and play for them? It's all too little too late. You know how this goes.
It's funny though. I'm like looking at, the standings, and here's the deal. Like, and they have a if they play well, top 5 defense. Like, why can't they get to 9-8 at this point? Like they can't do that. Well, 9-8 probably gets you in. It's probably not enough to win that division, but just think about what's happening in the AFC right now. Like the AFC North, I thought would be really good. Cleveland's done. Like they're not coming back from this. Cincinnati's they're 2-4. They're like the Jets. They're so good on offense that I assume that they'll like win some games, but will they get to 9-8 or are they in too big of a hole? I don't know. Pittsburgh, they always end up around that 9-8. Like Baltimore's going to win that division. In the AFC South, Houston's going to win that division. The Colts would have to get to 9-8. That sounds about right. If like that's about where they are. AFC West, the Chiefs are going to win that division, and every one of those other teams about 9-8 sounds about right. That one of them will do it, right? So I think 9 gets them in. I don't think they're done. So, and their team's good enough with Rodgers, those offensive weapons, and that defense. 9-8 should be a minimum for them this year, even at 2-4. But because of this coaching decision, and because like they're just going to get, it's New York, they're just going to get destroyed in the media. I don't know if they're going to fall apart or not. And it will be one of the biggest misses of the NFL season if that team doesn't make the playoffs. God, especially in an AFC year where some of the teams where you just assumed were going to be pretty good, like Cleveland, Cincinnati, Pittsburgh, Miami, that none of them are actually really good, and you don't make the playoffs, what a miss. So I don't think their season's done. I think their team, if they could just get to around 500, they might make it anyway. But we'll see. We'll see if they fall apart.
The biggest problem with them too, though, is protecting Aaron Rodgers right now, which was an issue last year too. And so if that doesn't get fixed, then he's going to get fed up and he might even get banged up again. That's what possible. I find is the biggest flaw for the Jets right now, is that offense isn't going, and it's the offensive line. And anytime that happens, you're not fixing that midseason. Like that just doesn't happen in today's NFL. And that's where the biggest problem with them is if they don't fix the offensive line, or at least mitigate or cover up that, like we were talking with the Commanders defense, they're done because Rodgers can't move like he used to, not nearly as much.
Yes. Everybody has a flawed roster. That their flaws are. All right, let me take a quick break. If you're listening to the radio or the podcast, you're going to hear part of the booth review podcast that I do with London Fletcher, where we recap every game that's produced by the Commanders. You'll hear that next. If you're watching us on YouTube, Callow and I are going to get into the caps a little bit. Very much the show is ESPN 630 Sports Capital. Welcome back. Every week I have the opportunity to sit down with my booth mate for the Commanders games, one of the all-time greats, London Fletcher, and we get to kind of just chop it up and talk about what happened the day before of the game that we called. This week was the first time in 5 weeks that we had the opportunity to sit down and talk about a loss to a very good team, the Baltimore Ravens. So in this week's episode of the Booth Review, we focused in on all the bad defensively and good offensively that we learned about the Commanders this week. Welcome to this week's edition of the Booth Review Podcast. I'm Bram Weinstein with one of the greatest linebackers of all time, London Fletcher. This is weird, London. It's been a month. We hadn't lost, so we're doing a review of a game the Commanders actually lost this week to a very good Baltimore Ravens team.
No, it's definitely a feeling of like, man, are we really at this point? We got that winning thing, man. I got used to that. I don't know about you, but it feels good to win, but obviously that wasn't the case yesterday. On my flight back home to Charlotte, I was just kind of reflecting on the game and where we are at as a team, as a franchise, as a kind of fan base. And I'm actually still optimistic about where we are. And, we'll get into the Ravens and what we think about them, but it definitely is not the money that we've grown accustomed to over the last month.
Yeah. Well, I want to start with this. I mean, because we don't know what's going on with John or Dorrance. You played in 256 consecutive games. I wonder if you're going to get a call from DQ this week because we took a couple injuries. Who knows? Yeah.
So hold on, Bram. All right. So you mentioned Doris Armstrong and Jonathan Allen, two defensive linemen that are injured. Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, they're healthy. So you think, I know I put on some weight, so you want me to go put my hand in the dirt? Is that what you're saying?
It was not a fat joke. No, it really wasn't. It was actually trying to be complimentary of you and make a snarky joke that's not going to happen. So,
so my buddies, my former teammates that were there that I played with, Fred Smoot, some of the other guys I played with, they would have took that as a Fletch. We need a couple D linemen. Can you suit up? That's all right. Yeah,
I'm hoping, as we're taping this, we don't know what the situation is with John or Dort, so hopefully we'll get some good news on both of their injuries as we move forward into the Carolina game this week. All right, let's focus back in on the Ravens game a little bit, where, listen, this is a team that's been in the playoffs 5 of the last 6 years, 17 of the last 25. They are very stable. They've had same front office structure for a very long time. Harbaugh's second longest tenured coach, 17th year, same owner for a long time. They have a unicorn quarterback. I think you know what you get with a team like that, and therefore I think why this felt like such a big game yesterday. So I want to go spin zone a little bit here because I got to be honest with you. I follow, what the media is going to say about the team afterwards, and they could have focused on a couple of things, and they seem to have focused more that Washington went toe-to-toe with them, were in a one-score game, saw the quarterback go toe-to-toe with an MVP quarterback, and decided not to overly focus on 484 yards given up. So I think both of these things are true, but to your point, I think people remained very optimistic that they saw what 5 in the offense can do and went toe-to-toe in a place where not a lot of teams win, frankly.
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. When the schedule first came out and you saw where we are as a recalibration, whatever you want to call it, new ownership, new general, new front office, new head coach, over completely turned over, and you saw the Ravens on the schedule. You're like, where they've been. They were the number 1 seed in the AFC a year ago. We won 3 games last year, 4 games. I can't even remember. It was I tried to wipe that out of my memory bank. Yeah. But you saw that on the schedule, and you're like, okay, can we go in there, kind of be a little bit competitive? This is prior to the season and the way guys have played recently and going on that 4-game winning streak. You're like, okay, Baltimore's they're up here on paper, we're down here. But then after you go in there, you see it end up being just a 1-score game. You feel pretty good about where we are right now. But I think you also have to look and say, we still need there's a lot more room for improvement. I think Coach Quinn will say that with the guy. There'll be some things that he takes away from the football game. We're like, man, I really like this. Love the way we competed. Love the way we did this. Love the way we did that. But these are some areas where we definitely need to improve, to get to where we're at the point where the Ravens are as a perennial Super Bowl contender, a team that can represent the NFC in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I think largely they were a good litmus test. I didn't like measuring stick. I thought we're just kind of too early in this process to use terminology, and I don't think the team liked that either. But I thought litmus test of where this is through 5 games, because I thought Dan Quinn was very honest about it last Friday. He was like, the good elephant in the room. This is happening faster than you thought it would, right? And he kind of acknowledged, it's all new, all these new players. We are trying to instill a new culture. We do think we have a special player at quarterback, but, it's baked in that it's going to take some time. It's the NFL, and it seemed to be coming along at a really expedited pace, which was really good. And that's why we landed on this game where you go, 4 of the first 6 are on the road. This is the hardest one of all of them because this is a team that's been there, done that, and looks like the type of team that at least on one side of the ball could compete for a championship again. Let's find out where they are. And I think in the end, when you look at the scoreboard, you go 30-23, it feels like it was momentum. But, and I assume you kind of feel the same way, but what Dan said to us, Coach Quinn said to us in the post-game press conference, in the interview we did with him, and even what he said in the press conference was, there were parts of this, and this I thought was honest and acknowledging what happened, that was quote unquote lopsided. And he's talking about the way the Ravens were able to move the ball on him defensively. That's the number 1 offense in the league. But you're going to give up 484 yards to anybody, and it's not just running, it's not just passing. You're going to have a hard time getting to the level that the Ravens are at.
Yeah, so when you look at the Ravens' last 6 possessions, touchdown, field goal, end of game where they were driving and they ran out the clock. I rewatched the game this morning a little bit, watched the defensive side, and because that was the side that I wanted to focus on first and foremost and see, okay, where were the breakdowns? Where were the things that we need to do better? First and foremost, I thought there were some communication errors that happened in that ball game that we hadn't seen during that 4-game winning streak, and there was some confusion on a couple different plays from a passing game standpoint. The Ravens they got good football players. Zay Flowers is a problem. They're going to win their fair share of matchups, but the part where I think Joe Witt will kind of be really disappointed is some of the miscommunications. There were a couple coverage busts where those things we kind of felt like, and I'm sure they felt like we're behind them. If you go back to the Tampa Bay game, the first game of the season, there were some issues like that kind of crept back up in this game from a coverage standpoint. They'll probably do some things, hey, from a technique standpoint that you could have played this a little bit different from a technique standpoint, giving yourself a better chance to win that down from a coverage standpoint. There were some gap fit issues in the running game where, guys didn't necessarily stay in their responsibilities, and they got some runs that hurt us in that ball game. And Derrick Henry's a monster, but you can't help him by not being where you need to be. So when you look at that and you say, are these places where we need different personnel? Is this an off-season issue, or is this just, hey, guys, we still are in the midst of the season, and these are things that we can get corrected right now? I say yes. Looking at that film, the communication errors, the kind of lapses or technique deals, you can get those corrected right now. And guys saying and playing in their correct responsibility when it comes to stopping a run, those are things that can be corrected right now during this season. So when you look at the film and they call it Tell the Truth Monday or whatever, when you tell the truth Monday, those are the things that they're going to talk about in that meeting room.
I want to talk about the Flowers matchup for a moment, because he had obviously a huge first half. And if you're going in and you're facing the Ravens, you've got to try to limit their run game. I mean, they came in averaging 211 yards a game in the modern NFL on the ground. That's stupid. It's an absurd number. It really is. Yeah. Like in the modern, when teams throwing the ball so much, it's an absurd number to have that. So they have this kind of unstoppable part of their offense. The one thing the Washington defense did really well yesterday was they limited Lamar on the ground. Like he was 11 for 40, something like that. So they limited him. Big day through the air though. And you could tell early Washington was committed to trying to at least slow down the Ravens run. And the numbers were there. But in the end, when asked to go out and get matched up with those receivers, they couldn't really handle it. There were 5 receivers for the Ravens that had at least 13 yards per catch. 5. That means everybody's getting chunk plays off of them. And the Flowers one, I remember talking to you pregame, talking to Logan about it, and I said, Mike Sanders still down the road is probably their slot corner. This is a unique person that they're facing. They haven't seen a lot of teams that have a receiver like this. Flowers as this kind of movable part who can go inside, outside, quick cut, quick explosion player. I remember looking at you going, who are they covering him with? And he ended up having a massive against them because I think Washington was dedicated to try to slow down the run. And the Ravens responded. I give them credit. They responded and found very good matchups. And Flowers, I believe, is he may not be perceived as a top 5, top 10 receiver, but at what he does for them, he's a very difficult matchup, and he was for Washington yesterday.
No, he was. He had the big play in their opening drive with on the screen play, the wide receiver rocket screen, where they caught us in a blitz, and it was a perfect call for them against a defense where we're bringing the pressure off that edge. So that got them going early in that ball game. But from a standpoint of when I talk about watching the film, tell the truth, there were some times, and again, I don't know exactly being coached, but just from a lot of his routes were in breaking routes that were across the field against coverage. And oftentimes the corners, they have outside leverage because of, you may have a post safety, things like that. But maybe you may want to shade a little bit inside on this type of route especially with the split that this guy has and his speed. And if we're gonna give up something, force them to beat us on the outside or out breaking route, things like that. So that may be something that they're talking about in their film room. The pass rush wasn't what it needed to be either. So there was a times where Lamar had an opportunity to go through his progressions, had a lot of time to find his open receivers. Part of that was off of play action. Again, you're geared up to stop Derrick Henry in that running game. So there was some open windows there. I look at it as, and it wasn't just Sammer still, he wasn't covering him, complete. He didn't shadow him anything. They had some different guys covering him, mainly Igbenogany and Sanders still. So, it's a hats off to the Ravens. Zay Flowers did a nice job, and they executed a game plan, to almost a T.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. Back in week 2, after week 1 with the Giants, I watched Wan'Dale Robinson, who I don't think is quite as talented, quick, whatever, like Zay Flowers is, but I watched him, and they were dumping it off to him a million times, and he's kind of that guy in the slot who's got some quickness, and I thought for sure the Giants would try to take advantage of it. And when they didn't, I was actually surprised that they went neighbors, because I think that is somewhat of an advantage. I don't think Robinson is of Flowers' level. Flowers is a unique player for them, especially in an offense where every defense has to load up against the run. You have no choice. You're going to get favorable matchups with him. And in Washington's case, I said to you pregame, I'm like, I don't know who's covering him. I think it's going to be a very difficult spot. Then they had to shift, at halftime because the passing game was getting them. And at that point, you're playing from behind against them. It's a death sentence. It's like trying to stop a Mack truck, and over and over. They're just battering you with Henry, Lamar, Justice Hill on the edge, and their run game is dominant.
No, you're absolutely right. When you got one leak and then you're trying to put that out, then you got another leak. So you go into the game knowing our focus is on stopping the run, stopping Derrick Henry, stopping Lamar Jackson. We can't allow these guys to just, as you mentioned, just bulldoze us or run us over in the Mack truck from a running game. To their credit, they went a lot of play action pass on first down.
Yes,
getting some chunk plays. Again, was the technique exactly the way you wanted to be played? Those are things that the coaches will talk about. Could you have done something different? Could you maybe gotten to the face of the receivers, try to disrupt them a little bit, things like that.
All right, let me get to the other side of the ball with you for a minute, because this also was semi-predictable for Washington, and I actually think it's the good thing, in my opinion, that really came out of this. So B-Rob's out. I want to get to his impact in a little bit later, but Washington has been essentially a 50-50 run team. Well, they're coming in against the team that has the, at least metrically, best rush defense in the NFL. I think that's a little skewed because teams are typically playing from behind against Baltimore. So they're throwing a lot more in the second half. So the rush numbers are a little bit off, but still, I don't want to take anything away from them. They came in with this. B-Rob's out. And I think we could both agree, everybody knew we had to score 30 to win. So this was going to be the first game where I think they walked in knowing that Jaden's throwing 30 to 40 passes. So we were going to be a pass-heavy offense no matter what. And honestly, they passed that test. Like, we didn't know. This year is, to me, all about set the culture, find out where your roster is, try to develop Jaden Daniels, which is clearly ahead of the curve. And then each week, you're going to have a different challenge. And this challenge this week was different than anything they had faced. They knew they were going to have to throw the ball a lot this weekend to have a chance to win. And we haven't seen them do that yet, where they had to rely on throwing the ball a lot. And honestly, in the end, that's the one I take away from this and go, I feel really good that forced into that situation to have to win this way, I think they're capable of it. And that's what I really liked about the game the other day.
Yeah, no, you're right. And when you look at, you mentioned the Ravens defense, that top billing as being the number one rush defense in the National Football League, it is earned. I know I look at yards per rush, and going into that ball game, the Ravens were allowing only 3 yards per carry. You want to be at about 3 yards or less. Actually, you want to be maybe about 3.3 yards per carry allowed rush attempt. And that's a really good run defense. They're at 3 yards per carry. We had 18 carries for 52 yards.
Yeah.
0.9 yards per carry against us. That top billing as a rush defense is earned. Looking at their pass defense, they have some issues in defending the pass. They've given up a lot of plays in the passing game. They've had some blown coverages, some miscommunications, they missed some guys that are no longer on that team from a year ago that left via free agency. They weren't playing the type of pass defense that the Ravens are accustomed to playing. They were number one in sacks a year ago. So they did that. They took the football away. They're not that type of defense currently when it comes to defending the pass.
Yeah.
And we had to rely on the passing game. And, you would have loved to have B-Rob in that game. And we would definitely have had more than 18 rushing attempts if he was in that game. But the way to go against the Ravens is through the air right now.
All right, that was me and London Fletcher from this week's episode of the Booth Review, which you can get wherever you get your podcasts, or you can check it out at commanders.com or on the Commanders YouTube page. Back after this, Bram watches show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. All right, welcome back. Bram watches show ESPN 630, the Sports Capital. I wanted to do this really quick. Did you see the end of the Oregon-Ohio State game the other day?
I did not.
Okay, so this is amazing. Like, it's very rare you see somebody do something with forethought that, like, Dan Lanning, their coach, deserves Coach of the Year for this moment because Oregon won. So I think both of those teams are going to end up in the playoff, like, because the playoff's been expanded, they'll probably both be in it anyway. But this was a classic. It was the classic. This might be the game of the year for the ESPYs. It was really great. At the end of the game, Ohio State gets the ball back with plenty of time. They're down 1 to get into field goal range. They sputter their way into Oregon territory, but they're like, it's way too long of a field goal. And they ended up with like a 3rd and 25 with like 12 seconds or 10 seconds left on the clock, right? Oregon goes into a timeout, comes out with 12 men on purpose, okay? 12 men on purpose. Or Ohio State runs a play. It's an incomplete pass. They get called for the penalty. They're still out of field goal range, but because it's a live ball play, the clock ran off anyway. So they purposefully ran off the time, took the bet that if we have an extra guy on the field, they'll either, it doesn't even like, it'll be an incomplete pass or an interception or something bad's going to happen. And the clock's going to run off and it's going to leave them with less time than they need to do what they need to do to get into field goal range. And it worked. Brilliant. This is one of those, I wonder if they're going to have to think about the rules after Like, this is a Belichick move where they, at the end, they go, wait a minute, that's a loophole. Like, I could run 15 guys on the field, and like, no, I'm going to take a penalty, but no, you're not going anywhere. And so that's a loophole, but I want to credit Oregon. That was a hell of a loophole that they jumped through to ensure a win the other day.
Belichick must be proud, because that is very Belichick. And then, yeah, you're right. They're going to have to take a look at that, or else everyone's going to start doing it.
Well, right, because like now I'm running 20 guys on the field and go, hike it, dudes. Dare ya. Go ahead, hike it.
Right.
So anyway, all right, so that was cool. All right, Caps, game 2 tonight. They get Vegas. News of the day is Alex Ovechkin moves to the opposite side of the ice and will play right wing, which to me, I'm kind of like, but what do you think? Is that a big deal?
No, they had talked about this in the summer. I should say in training camp. It's not training camp in summer, but in September, that they were going to move him a little bit. And Carberry's trying to, as we kind of use with Peter Laviolette, just squeeze what's left out of him. And this is what he's doing with Ovechkin. So a little bit of a wrinkle to see if it'll get Ovechkin going. I don't know if they were going to go to it in game 2, but as I said to you yesterday, I think it was the 23rd or 24th game in Ovi's career that he didn't have a shot on net. So
yeah,
trying to get him going in game 2. Vegas, like I said, has a couple of guys that might get under his skin and might, wake him up a little bit. Once again, I'm not like panicking over here, but this is Carberry basically trying to flip it up a little bit just to see what could happen.
Old Vetchkin. Do you like that one?
I think
Old Vetchkin.
You've used that one before. I've heard that one before. It's okay.
What was that? What was the voice they did last year? We're not going to be suck this year.
Yeah, you turned him into the old guy from Indiana Jones for some reason. I don't
know. Who was in net in game 1? I didn't catch that. Who was that?
Lindgren. Lindgren was in net.
Linger was in net. They're going with the Vegas guy tonight against Vegas. So he's playing the motivation game, Carberry. You play that, right? So we'll get our debut of him tonight. We'll get to see him tonight too.
Yeah, this one was like, we all saw the schedule when it came out after free agency. We're like, oh, he's getting that second start. And yeah, he announced it yesterday. Like, I know it's not like they don't always announce the starting goaltender the day before, but yeah, that one was like so obvious that everyone was like, yeah, you're going to give him the start against his old team. And Thompson was funny. He had a comment over training camp that, because the Commanders are playing, not a lot of people go through what these guys are saying, but basically someone from the Caps media was like, oh, like, how was it in Vegas, whatever. And he's like, well, if you talk to them, like, it's not like I really played goaltender. Like they love their defensemen so much that it doesn't matter who plays in goal. So he actually had a little bit of like, I wouldn't call it vinegar, but a little bit of like motivation to say, let me show you that I'm actually a real goaltender, because all they want to talk about is how good our defense is over there. So I expect him to have a good game tonight.
All right, so I didn't get to watch the opener. We had a whole family event going on here Saturday night, so I'm excited. I'll be catching the Caps for the first time tonight, so I'm psyched to check them out against Vegas. All right, everybody, talk to you tomorrow. Bram and Washington, ESPN 630, Sports Capital.